well as, I don't know where else we are, but wherever we are, a very warm welcome to everyone who's joining us. Shir is live, and we are glad you're with us. So we hope you could see the screen, whether you're here in person, see it behind me. If you are here on virtually, then you could see it on your screen. And for those who participate, you'll be getting these booklets to follow along with next week, please God, so you could follow along in the texts of the ideas that we're discussing. Let's just summarize what we discussed until now. We asked, why is learning about death important or even relevant? Please God, we all live bis 180 Jahr. Yeah, a long, nice, good life. But should we worry about death? Is it even something to be concerned about? Let's just live life, right? How does it go? The American pie? Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Is that the way it goes? Okay, I'll go into a different profession. But according to some social psychologists, the uniquely human awareness of death, we gave it a name, it's called thanatophobia. Thanatophobia means the fear, the awareness of death, actually helps us to cope with our psyche. And we discussed a few aspects and elements of that. Philosophically, how is this relevant? What benefit does it have from a philosophical perspective? There are aspects of being aware of our mortality, which we discussed yesterday. We discussed how emotionally it is beneficial as well. So we talked, obviously there's pain, there's other emotional issues that are connected with dealing with something as tragic as death. Pardon? I got it. There we go. Thank you. And thank you for that. And then practically speaking, there are many issues that we have to deal with. Do we prepare for it? Do we put all our matters in order? After the funeral, this week's the portion of Kedoshim. I sometimes joke, because last week was Achrei Mot, right? Achrei Mot literally means after the death of the sons of Aaron. This week is Kedoshim, holy. Deals with matters of sanctity, many various laws that are included in the parsha. And next week is Emor. If you put the three together, it goes Achrei Mot, Kedoshim, Emor. After a person dies, people like to talk about how holy they were. That's very nice. But if they left a messy trail, and the family's got to deal with it, that's a big problem. So each of us could think about, how can I practically prepare in a way that is not going to leave that mess for my loved ones? And if you were left in such a mess, you don't want to do that to others, right? So what can you do to avoid and prevent that from happening? So these, as much as it sounds like something you want to avoid discussing this topic, regardless of your age and stage in life, because it can happen to anyone at any age or stage. So rather to be cognizant of it. And that's why we want to look at all areas, whether it's philosophical from the mind and the soul, or emotional. If I'm afraid of it, what am I afraid of? What's the fear? Can I address that fear, or do we want to just avoid it? Right? Ignorance is bliss. You know the difference between ignorance and apathy? I don't know and I don't care. So how will we relate to it? And finally, practically speaking, what will I do about it? And these are all issues that we could discuss and can actually be helpful if we know how to deal with it in advance. So, practically, what are we going to say? We had a question. What feelings does this evoke in you? And that's where the pain was discussed. There's no pain that compares to death, the finality of death and all that, and that's why it's so scary. And we discussed a variety of fears related to it, which we don't have to harp on. We will now move a little bit more forward, and we'll start off with a very basic question. We discussed a concept called terror management theory, which basically tells us that our awareness of death influences many elements of our lives. And if we could be aware of those, then I think it could certainly help us in coping with, God forbid if we have to deal with others. But I think for all intents and purposes in our discussion, perhaps how we could deal with it, knowing that it might come to us at some stage in 180 years, who knows when. Is that Mickey? How are you? Come join us. Come join our shir. So good to see you. Sorry, guys. Yeah. Yes, of course. Every Monday. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You're always welcome. Come, take a seat. All right. So we were talking about COVID, and this morning on the radio, I hear how COVID is the number of cases are increasing again. How careful we have to be. It's very important. No doubt about that. And certainly that itself has created another, call it another storm, right? It's provided that perfect storm of fear and anxiety that's associated with death that many people are worried about. Well, certainly that could be another concern, but are we going to get stuck there? I hope not. So, to deal with it, let us take a little bit of an analysis of who we are.
You want me to put my earphones
Okay,
in?
who am I? That's today's shir. Is death the end of who we are? Am I gone? We said death is final. Finito. Done. But I think the answer to this question depends entirely on how we identify ourselves.
Who am I?
How you answer this question, who am I? So the first question that we need to really figure out is who we are. Do you know who you are? Jackie Mason, alav shalom. He passed away only a few months ago. He has a routine about this guy who visits a psychiatrist, and the doctor evaluates him and gives him an analysis. He says, you have an identity problem. We have to figure out who the real you is. That will be $100. So the guy says, wait a minute. If you're not sure who the real me is, what are you doing charging me $100? Okay? Maybe you're the real me, and I'm the real you, right? And you owe me $100. Now, one of the wise men of Chelm was bothered by this great dilemma, who he was. And worried about this, especially every time he went to the public bathhouse. Don't see very many of them here, but I stayed at a hotel in Cape Town recently. And right outside this fancy hotel, 15 on Orange, there's a big public bathhouse. Yeah. So he was worried, especially in those days, people had to go to, where did you bathe? So he wouldn't know who he was. If he goes there, he's going to get confused with all the other Nakat dimension. Everyone else is in their birthday suits as well. How will we know who he is? He's not wearing any identifiable clothes. So he was thinking, he's not wearing clothing. How is he going to distinguish himself from all the others there? He might have an identity crisis. What do you do? A lot of people these days have identity crises. So he devised a plan. And his plan was, he tied a red string around his big toe, so that even in the bathhouse, he would just look down. Oh, that's me. Standing out. Sadly, when he was in the shower, what happened was, the water and the soap suds and the shampoo and all the good zachen, they all loosened the red string. And now, to make matters worse, the red string floated along the next cubicle, and it landed, somehow it twirled around the big toe of the fellow under the next shower. Was tut sich? What are we going to do? So now, don't forget he's from Chelm, and Chelm, they were very wise. So this Chelma genius, he discovered that his string is gone, and he started panicking. What am I going to do? Was tue ich? It's a serious identity crisis going on here. He wasn't sure what to do. And then he saw that the fellow next door is sporting this red string. So he runs over to the next shower. He goes, Reb Yid, I know who you are, but tell me, Zagmer, who am I? So that's what we need to discover. Who are we? And we are discussing something so morbid that I have to throw some laughter in. Otherwise, who knows what will happen, right? In Jewish thought, death is not considered the end of life, but rather the beginning of a new phase of life. As I say, it's the end of life as we know it. Okay? We know it life with knowing this person in their corporeal physical body. And now, unfortunately, we don't know it the same way. Okay? Now, yesterday, Miriam, who was here, mentioned the idea of nitzchis haneshama, the concept that the soul is eternal. And that's a good point. And also the idea of tchias hamesim, right? The resurrection of the dead. So these are true points. And we're going to get to that because as you'll see, we talk about the soul is eternal. That's why I say it's only the end of life as we know it, because the soul is still here. The soul will always be here. But the physical, mortal aspect of life, that's what has changed. So, to understand what death is, I think we really need to examine what is life. Okay? Meaning, I hope that through our lessons, through our discussions, death will inform us what is life. Like I said yesterday, the Gemara tells us a lot about, we can learn about marriage from divorce. Now, if death is simply a new phase of life, then clearly we're not understanding what life is. Because according to our current definition, we think of death as the end. What happened to the person we knew? So let's go back a second. What is life and who are we really? How would you understand that? And I think this is particularly something to consider. It's so important to our conversation because if we don't know who or what we are, then we're incapable of determining whether death is our beginning, is it our end, is it the middle, is it something else entirely, what is it? We know that according to Jewish tradition, we'll come back, there's this concept of reincarnation, but what is it ultimately, practically? Let's discuss this a little bit in order to get a good understanding. Now, if you are a philosophical sort of person, you might spend a lot of time wondering about this. Remember the guy on his date? He remembered what his sister-in-law told him. If it gets boring, you can talk about food, family, and philosophy. Okay? So he says, food. Do you like kneidlach? She says, no. So, okay. Family. Do you have a brother? No. Philosophy. If you had a brother, would he have liked kneidlach? So, are we philosophizing about this? From the mix of cells and the surging of chemicals and electrical impulses that we call life, all of this entire composition of the human anatomy, where do we come from? Who are we? If you are more of a right, so that's like the philosophical perspective. Now, if you're more practical nature, then you spend more time thinking about pragmatic matters, like what's for lunch? Okay. What's the cost of petrol today? Should I fill up today or yesterday? What is it based on? Rands, dollars? We have different types of questions. Yet when we encounter a crisis, God forbid, illness, death, somebody we love, we're forced to confront this very question. And at these moments, life seems so fragile, so ephemeral, so difficult to define. And unfortunately, I find myself at West Park very, very often. And it's like a little bit of a reminder. This morning I got a shocking phone call from the school. One of my children was choking. And thank God she's okay, Baruch Hashem. They had to perform a Heimlich on her. And she was shaken up, and my wife had to go quickly. Now, what is that little incident, part of Hatzalah? And I've unfortunately seen when it didn't end well. My little baby, my child. So when we face these situations, we're all of a sudden wondering, it gives us a little jolt about life, right? That's where we get that wake-up call. We suddenly feel like specks in the vastness of the universe. Here for a moment, and then, God forbid, could be gone. Right? That forces us to confront these types of questions. Who are we really? What is our life all about? What are we here for? What's our purpose? What's our function? What is it all about? For what reason are we here? And what difference do I make? So, in fact, there's a story. The Alter Rebbe was once holding his young grandson, his Einikel, who later became great Rebbe himself, the Tzemach Tzedek. He's holding him in his lap. And the young boy was sitting very contentedly, and he's stroking his Zayda's beard. I don't have that much of a beard for my grandkids to stroke yet. Oh, I don't have grandkids yet. Maybe then I'll have a little bit more of a beard, right? So the kid was saying, Zayda, grandfather. So the grandfather, Alter Rebbe, he said, this is not Zayda. This is Zayda's beard. Where is Zayda? He asked him. The child put his hands on the Rebbe's head and goes, this is Zayda. And what did his grandfather tell him? No, this is Zayda's head. Where is Zayda? And the same conversation repeated itself. The child touched the Rebbe's eyes. This is not Zayda, this is Zayda's eyes. And Zayda's hands. This is not Zayda, this is Zayda's hands. And, you can imagine his chest, etc. And the young boy got off his grandfather's lap and he hid behind a door. And suddenly he shrieked, Zayda, Zayda! The Alter Rebbe turned to him and, very concerned, asked, what's the Geshem? What happened? Ah, there is Zayda, he said. You see, if you study Jewish literature, Jewish mysticism, the answer to this question of who we are is not something that is just a physical observation. We need to turn to the world of the spirit for the answer. We need to understand a little bit more. And of course, as we proceed, we will discuss different aspects and elements and sources. But oftentimes I get asked this question, how do you know this? How do you know it's true? Tell you the truth, even if I was ever in that world, I don't remember. So how could I be held accountable to answer this to you? So anything I tell you, I'm quoting to you from the Mishnah, the Torah, the Talmud, the Medrash, Kabbalah, Shulchan Aruch, Jewish law. How do they know what happens? Right? Was anyone there who came back to let us know all this? So I'm not going to be able to empirically prove any of this to you. That's not my function, purpose, idea here. That's not something I can do. I'm not holy enough or wise enough to answer those questions. But I do think that the compilation of sources and ideas and texts and everything we're going to include in this series will address life and the afterlife from a Jewish perspective, from these sources that I mentioned. And, I'm just simply presenting these ideas to you. We could certainly open up conversation and discuss it, but I have no authority. I'm not the author, composer, editor even of any of these texts. So certainly if you have these questions and you need scientific or explanations or empirical evidence, I'm not ready for that yet. Right? What did I tell you that when they asked me what type of coke I said, no, I don't want to diet. So yes, you might have questions about these things. You know, God in His kindness gave us this behind the scenes glimpse in the Torah, in Jewish literature, of what happens in the spiritual realms. And that's what we know. And that's what I'm sharing with you, is those ideas, as Jewish law tells it to us. So whatever I'm sharing with you from these texts, they're written by great sages who perhaps were privy. And if you're skeptical, okay, Zol Zayin. At least it's something interesting. You learned another perspective, right? Now, according to the Jewish perspective, which I'm going to read with you right now from Rabbi Chaim Vital. You might be familiar with Rabbi Chaim Vital. Rabbi Chaim Vital is a Kabbalist. He was the student of the Arizal. I'll just read to you a little bit about his history, his biography. Oh no, a very short taste of it. He lived in Tzfas and Jerusalem. He was born in Israel and later lived in Damascus. Interesting. There was once a Jewish community there. He was authorized by his teacher, Rabbi Isaac Luria, you're all familiar with the Arizal, to record his teachings. Acting on this mandate, Rabbi Chaim Vital began arranging his master's teachings in written form, and his many works constitute the foundation of the Lurianic school of Jewish mysticism. His most famous work is called Eitz Chaim, Tree of Life, and I guess it's also a play of on his name. So let's see what he says. Okay, he writes that he addresses this very existential question, and we'll read a text of this right here. And he explains that the essence of who we are actually is our souls. Our bodies are only the garments of our true beings. That's the way he puts it. So let me read it to you, and then we can analyze and discuss it. He says, Noida el bali mada. The wise are aware that ki gufa adam eneno adam atzma mitzad guf, that the human body is not the human being. Nimtza ha'adam hu apnimius. When we speak of a human being, we are referring to the human's inner dimension. Aval haguf inyan levush echad tislabish bo nefesh hasichlis asher hi ha'adam atzma ba'oda ba'olam haza. He says that the body is merely a garment in which the soul is attired during its sojourn in this world. So the body is the vehicle through which the soul is able to get around this world for the limited amount of time that we are here. Now, although Rabbi Chaim Vital makes reference, he calls it the nefesh hasichlis, which literally means the intellectual soul. This is already getting a little bit more technical in the language. As you'll see in the coming weeks, we will discuss 5 levels of soul, which you'll notice that many shuls, including here, look, there's how many candles? 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When they pray, 5 candles, referring to the 5 levels of the soul. But when he talks about nefesh hasichlis, you might be familiar with the animal soul, which if you studied Tanya or any Hasidic philosophy, and we're not going to go into the details, but so Oftentimes, when people talk about soul, they just say the soul. But there's so many different levels of the soul. So we're not going to go into that discussion because this isn't a Jewish mysticism class. But perhaps when we get a little bit more into this, we'll talk a little bit more. So who is the real I is my question to you. According to this text that we just read from the Arizal, or his student, Rabbi Chaim Vital, I'm not a particular body part, like the grandson of the Alter Rebbe says. Is it the beard? Is it your cheek? Is it your hand? Which one is Zayda? Okay? Am I my head? Am I the heart? What about all my body parts together? The whole entire anatomical composition? I'm also not my accumulated knowledge or intellect or emotions or feelings or fears or desires. The real I is the soul, the neshama. So what we're going to do here, we're going to watch a little video. And this video will hopefully give us a little perspective on this idea. And the video is narrated by Rabbi Shais Taub. Anyone here familiar with him? He's a Hasidic lecturer in New York. And watch the video. You'll see he encourages the visualization of a physical musical instrument and the spiritual song that it plays to portray the physical body and the spiritual soul that is in it. Pay attention, watch the video, and we'll be right back. Uh-oh, what's going on? Can everyone see? What's the Gushen? Nothing could just go properly, right? You have to have trouble. Select. What does it want? I'm going to put this on pause for a moment.
Hi, this is Rabbi Shais Taub. Welcome to a series of meditations for the course Journey of the Soul. The purpose of these meditations is going to be internalizing some of the Hi, this is Rabbi Shais Taub. Welcome to a series of meditations for the course Journey of the Soul. The purpose of these meditations is going to be internalizing some of the deeper ideas that are a little bit difficult to grasp. And generally, we will try to do so by way of visualization, trying to picture symbols that represent some of the ideas and that we can focus on briefly so that we can begin to connect on a deeper level to these ideas. To begin with, the entire notion of life is a challenging concept because it is so intangible. We're used to relating to things, to that which we can see, to that which we can touch. And life is completely intangible. How do we begin to relate to that which is unseeable, untouchable? How do we envision, how do we see the unseeable? So if you will, I'll ask you to begin right now, however you're most comfortable doing so. Close your eyes, keep your eyes open. Envision a musical instrument, a physical object, let's say a piano, made of wood and wires, something you can look at with your physical eyes, you can touch it with your physical hands. It's a physical object. Now, the piano is merely a thing. A person comes over to the piano, the pianist sits down and begins playing a beautiful song. Now, this song stirs your soul. Try to hear it. Hear the music. Where is the song? Can you see it? Can you touch it? You can see and touch the piano. You can't see or touch the song. And now the song is over, and the piano is standing there. If you'll open up the piano, will you find the song? Think now how everything in the world is matter and energy. The matter is the physical object that we see, the piano. The energy is the intangible, the song. We'll take a half a minute now to try to think of ourselves in these terms. Think of your body as the instrument, the physical object that can be seen, that can be touched. And think of the life you live as the song that is being played through the instrument. We'll take half a minute right now to see and hear the piano and the song, the body and the soul.
How's that? Okay. So, my friends, let's look at this and let's discuss this. Look at the screen and let me ask you, who am I? We just determined that the real me is my soul, not my body. Yes? Well, let's take it a little bit further. Is it my knowledge, my intellect, my emotions, my desires? So who are you? At least the way we're conveying it for now. Who are you? Combination of everything. Combination of everything? True. But what was the ultimate idea that he was conveying, Rabbi Chaim Vital, in this text? I am my soul. Okay? All right, so the real me is my soul, the way he puts it. Now, there are certain words and concepts that many of us pretend to understand. You want to sound sophisticated? Pretend we understand it. You understand the theory of relativity? No? You understand electricity? The Big Bang Theory. When your doctor gives you a tablet, a pill to take, you understand what exactly the process of what's in that pill and every single thing in it? Now, only when it comes to Jewish stuff do we start questioning, is it true? Is it? If and when any of these are mentioned in conversation, right, we nod our heads as if we understand. But if we're honest, then most of us actually have very limited understanding of what these entities really are. Okay, even if we're familiar with their effects. I think when we talk about soul, it's a similar idea that we're not really, myself included, clued up in exactly what the soul is and how it works. The soul is just another term. Okay, I just said the real me of the human being is the soul. So let me ask you then, what is the soul? Yeah, you do an MRI. Will you find the soul there?
Is it your life force?
Sonogram, find the soul? X-ray? No, we just tried multiple scans. I'm asking you, where's the soul?
Is it your life force?
So, what analogy could you think of to depict the body-soul relationship? Okay, let's think. Yeah, the rabbi used a piano and the song. Where's the song? Let me ask you, if the car is the body of the car, is the car the body and the engine the soul? Yes? I don't know, I'm asking. Before we engage in this discussion, we need to concede that as physical people, as corporeal, mortal, finite human beings with physical frames of reference, we cannot really picture or fully grasp what a soul is. Much as a person born not seeing cannot really picture or understand the concept, the idea of colors, a person who can't hear, when as much as you're going to describe to them music, now maybe they could read about it, maybe they could, but they can't fully relate to it because they can't hear it. They don't know what the sound is. So how could we know what the neshama is if we are sort of not fully capable of relating to it? Or maybe we can because it's part of us. So let's turn to the Torah's description of the creation of the human being. The very, 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 very beginning, right? The genesis of creation. In the very first verse, we see cricket or baseball. Are you wondering what am I talking about? Remember, there was an old man, Moshe Lyons, that was his name, Morris Lyons. At the old age home I used to work 18 years ago in New York. And he used to say to me, Rabbi Kievman, is there baseball in the Bible? And I would be, don't be silly, what are you talking about? He says, it's the very first verse. I said, really, what are you saying? He goes, what's the first verse? I said, Bereshit bara Elokim. In the beginning, God created. He goes, no, say that again. In the beginning.
In the beginning.
Right there in the beginning, we are informed about the existence of the neshama of the human soul. And let's look at it together in the verse, okay? The first verse, what does it say? Vayetzer Hashem Elokim es ha'adam. God formed the human. Interestingly, the English word human is probably related to the Latin word humus, not to be confused with hummus that you eat with your pita, okay? What does humus in Latin mean? Soil. Okay, that's similar to the Hebrew word for man, Adam, which is, very interesting. The word Adam has two meanings. On the one hand, it means Adama, dust of the earth. On the other hand, it means Adameh, which is compared to God. So, on the one hand, there is the soul. On the other hand, is the soil. And what's the difference between soul and soil? Soul is S-O-U-L. I'm created in the divine image. I have to be contributing, making a difference, like the Almighty. On the other hand, Adama is soil. S-O-I-L. Like the animal's always focused on the soil, on itself. So God formed the human of soil from the earth. And what does the verse say? Vayipach bi'apav nishmat chayim. God breathed into his nostrils a neshama, a soul of life. Vayihi ha'adam lanefesh chaya, and the human being became a living soul, a living being. Okay, we're starting with this verse. Now, when did this happen? What day of creation was this? Pardon?
Ah,
The last day of creation. On the sixth day, God created man. On the one hand, God brought us into a ready-made universe. You come to a simcha, to a function, to an event. Imagine you arrive at the wedding and they say, start peeling the potatoes. Let's get the food cooked. No, that doesn't happen. The VIPs come last. What I mean by last, you come to a function that's all ready for you. Decorated, set up, cooked, prepared, photographers there, musicians there. Everything is ready-made for you. God brought us to a ready-made world. One of the great sages kept 2 notes in his pocket. In one note, it said, Bishvili nivra ha'olam. The whole world was created for me. The world is my oyster. In the other pocket, he kept another note. This note said, Anochi afar ve'efer, I am but dust and ashes. That little mosquito came before me. An annoying little ant. Everything was created before me. So there's 2 perspectives, 2 ways of seeing everything that preceded me. So what day of creation was this? 6th day. Very good. Earlier in that day, God created what? No, before man. What did God create?
animals.
On the last day?
Animals.
Animals. Put it on the board for you. Okay, you can see it right here. God created animals. You want to read a description of that occurrence? This verse I just read to you was chapter 2, verse 7. Now we're going to go back and we're going to read chapter 1 of Bereshis, verse 24. What does it say here? Vayomer Elokim, God said, Toitzei ha'aretz nefesh chaya lemina, let the earth bring forth living beings of different species. Veremes v'chaisai eretz lemina, cattle, creeping things. Behema, veremes v'chaisai eretz lemina, cattle, creeping things, and beasts of the earth according to their species. Vayichein, and so it was. Yes, you see the verse? Okay. Now, can you identify the primary distinction between the creation of the human being and the creation of the animal and other forms of life? We have both verses in front of us. What is the difference between the two? Stay here until we figure this out.
The
Let's
one
go.
serves, the one serves the other.
The animal, let's hear it. Rosalind, say it a little louder.
The one serves the other.
One serves the other, okay. That was Rosalind. Was sagst du? You say the animals don't have a soul. Well,
In
that's
speech.
interesting. They have a soul, it's different. Pardon?
Speech. One can talk, one can't.
Okay, that's another difference. Go ahead. Man is more intelligent than the animal, okay? But there's one difference blatantly clear in the verse. Otazoi, thank you, Mr. Chaitowitz. Hashem breathed into the human a soul of life. And it doesn't say that about any other creations. That's not to say there's no soul in an animal, and it's not to negate any of the other wonderful suggestions that everybody made about speech, about intellect, about all the other suggestions that you all made. Man is fashioned, what does it say? First, the hardware, right? What did the verse say? Soil from the earth, and then the software. The soul was imparted into the body. Okay, so We have all the physical components, and only then comes the soul, the spiritual. Okay, all the programming, the information. And this is in direct contrast with how animals came to be. Animals were created with their life force already endowed in them, while human beings were initially no more than an inanimate form molded from the earth, as the verse describes, which only later had life breathed in. Look at the verse. Animals sprang forth from the earth as fully living creatures. Now, this is a very interesting distinction that's made by some of the commentaries, and we are going to just analyze this for a little bit, particularly the element of the soul that is mentioned in this verse. Now, it might not seem like a significant detail, but in fact, it is actually monumental. This tells us something very important about the human soul. It doesn't necessarily share an existence with the body. The fates of body and soul are not necessarily intertwined. Now that seems a little bit different, but
Material.
well, the physical body, I mean, yes, somebody's writing to me, what about animals? Pets and animals, whether, I agree, they also might have a soul, okay? I guess the discussion is whether their souls survive the death of the body, right? Is there a doggy heaven? Maybe. Okay. It's very possible. I'm not underestimating it. I don't know. The basic Kabbalistic principle teaches that every creation actually has a soul. There's a divine spark, human, animal, even vegetable, and even something as inanimate as a stone. Everything. The soul of every creature, though, is different. It is tailored to its specifications and functions as a creation of God. But it's only the human souls that retain that distinct individual identity after the body's passed on. So the souls of all other creatures are subsumed in their divine sources. And in the case of animal, the divine source of animals Kabbalah talks about is the Merkava. It's a whole separate discussion. But when we talk here about the soul of the human being, we're talking, it's different. Most importantly, just as body and soul weren't a single unit at the inception of the very first creation of the very first human being, Adam and Eve, they were first a body, and then God breathed into them soul of life. Well, in that sense, our sages tell us that body and soul part ways when we pass on from this world. There's a separation. So, the human body we discussed is formed from the earth, and the soul is inserted into the body. Animals, on the other hand, the life force and body are created together. Now let's read something very interesting. One of the great commentaries, this is called the Chizkuni. Chizkuni is, I'm going to read to you what he says here now. He was a French rabbi, what they call an exegete, a commentator in the 13th century in France. His commentary on the Torah, called Chizkuni, his real name was Rabbi Chizkiah ben Manoach. So, with his name Chizkiah, called it Chizkuni. It's based principally on the works of Rashi, and according to his own testimony, he also draws on early on various other commentators and many other sources, many that he collected in his travels. In those days, you couldn't just take a WhatsApp video or anything like that. And he focuses on elucidating the straightforward meaning of the text of the Torah. Very simple. So let's read what he says. Okay? I'm reading the verse to you. It says, Vayipach bi'apav nishmas chayim. This verse says, God imbued. Let's go back to the verse a second. God breathed into his nostrils a neshama, soul of life. So he says it as follows. God did what he had not done in any other creature. What? He blew into Adam with his Holy Spirit a neshama that is immortal and does not perish when the body dies. Okay, those are his words. That it is immortal. It doesn't perish when the body dies. So what does that tell us about our souls?
Lives on.
Pardon?
Lives on.
Okay. So when a person passes away, now there's various levels of neshama, so I don't want to go into all that at the moment, but because in fact we're told the nefesh level of soul stays in the grave. And that's why it's not that, the soul's no longer connected to the body, and so what's the point of visiting a gravesite? Because there is a level. Remember we said there's 5 levels of soul. It's nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida. Here he's using the language of the word, the term nefesh. So let's focus on this level of soul called the nefesh. The first point he's saying is the soul does not perish when the body dies. Okay? We're all with it so far? Now, not only is the real I not the body, from what he's telling us, but the true self does not even need to inhabit the body, because the soul exists before there's a body and after as well. Okay? And psychology, the real me actually often refers to a sense of authenticity. Who's the real me? How a person is when uncensored, and when you're able to access and express yourself through words and behavior without concern of the social norms or other conditions, responses. How do you feel in the shower when no one else is around, when you could express yourself? You could sing without anybody judging, right? Now, of course, we're only partly aware of our deepest thoughts, wishes, motivations, potentials. Okay? And those are also ever-changing. And therefore, identifying and acting as the real me, the way psychology might see it, may be more of an ideal than actually attainable. It's different than the real me. We're not talking here about your self-expression. What part of yourself is actualized, okay? We're talking here about your deepest self, your soul. The real I, which we're discussing, goes beyond all of the expressions of our consciousness, beyond our awareness of what we perceive to be my true self, or my deepest, most authentic values, my personality, my thoughts, my wishes, my motivations. The real I is our spiritual divine core, the soul that gives us life. That's a whole different level of persona. So, let's say it's not just the body. Okay? The true self doesn't even need to have a body, because it's the soul. The true I, as we just described here, is eternal. Right? What do we say about the true self? What does it say on the screen? That the soul doesn't perish when we die. It's the source of the body's biochemistry. It's not a product of it. And while it inhabits the body for a while, the soul preceded the body. And the soul continues to exist even after the body is gone and disintegrated and gone. You think about a refrigerator and electricity. Got a little video for that. Let me see how I could post this video up here for you. How will I do this? I have a little video that I want to illustrate this idea for you. Okay, ladies and gents, I'm going to pause for a moment, and I'm going to put
No, cook the meat and eat it because we had.
It's a very distorted question. The premise is false. Where does the soul go to when we die? So I'll give you this dialogue that I used to explain it. The dialogue goes like this. Imagine a discussion between an air conditioner or a refrigerator and electricity. Just, bear with me. So the refrigerator is plugged in. Okay, great. And it's cooling food. Now suddenly the plug is pulled, and the refrigerator says to electricity, where do you go to when the plug is pulled? And electricity answers to the refrigerator, what do you mean where I go to? Where did you come from? You're a little box that was just created in the last 19th to 20th century. I've been around from the beginning of time, and I'm everywhere. And then, once you created this box called you, you've contained me, you've confined me in your box, and so you become a cooling agent that cools food, that refrigerates food inside of you. So what do you mean where I go? Where'd you come from? You're the newcomer to the scene, not me. Basically, the expression that when we ask where does the soul go to, it's implying that here is where it's at, and where does the soul suddenly go? But maybe it's the other way around. The soul is where it's at, and this world is a newcomer. We're like the box. The soul enters the box. You and I are the box, the refrigerator. And the soul, which is a force of electricity, enters into this box for a period of time, and then it just goes back to its natural place. The fact that you're not familiar with that place, or you have no idea, is just no different than a refrigerator is not familiar with electricity. All it is a box. The material world is very myopic vision. We have very narrow vision. We only see the here and now. We don't see the larger journey of life. Spiritual people understand that it's all stages in a journey. I think it was one thinker that said, we are not material people having spiritual experiences. We're spiritual people having a material experience. In other words, it really comes down to how we see life. Is this it? And the soul is some type of exotic novelty? Or is the soul it, and this is some exotic novelty? It's a whole different way of looking at life. So essentially, it doesn't necessarily relieve the pain of loss of death, but it makes you understand that when the soul moves on, it didn't go anywhere. It may be right here, except it's not being contained in a container that we can see. So it's spiritually here, but not materially here. Whereas we in this material world live in the illusion. We only see on this side of the curtain. We don't see behind the curtain.
You might have seen videos like this before, but here's the big secret. Anyone can make one of these videos in a
in the body is like a stranger. The soul is a stranger in the.
Lunch will be in 15 minutes. Okay, final 15 minutes. Okay, so while I saw this video, actually, as much as I like that analogy, I would say though that it's not exact. Why? Because I mean, Rabbi Jacobson is a brilliant teacher and scholar, and I'm sure he was giving a good analogy and a good example for this. But I would say electricity is just a general stream, as opposed to each individual neshama, which has a unique identity. Every soul is created in the divine image, uniquely so. Each one of us is indispensable in God's eyes, and if we are each unique, so maybe think about it, the body is a garment to the soul. You know, it's winter now, so you have to take out your coat. You take out your parent, what do you call a nice warm winter coat? Come on, in America, in New York, we had to get a nice fancy, what do you call those coats with the fur? The felt? A pelts. Pelts is the Yiddish word for it. Right, but what's the particular one? I'm forgetting. Cashmere sweaters and, come on, help me out here, guys. Probably don't even know. It doesn't get that cold here, does it? Pardon?
No.
Oh, no. Yes, you got to keep warm, absolutely. What's that coat? No, not fleecy. You see? What do your relatives in New York wear in the winter as their coat? What do they call that? I can't even believe it. Pardon? A trench coat? No. That too. That's more for the rain.
An overcoat.
Overcoat, but what's it made out of?
It's made out of cashmere.
Fur. A fur coat. I'm talking about a particular fur, a particular kind of a fur that. Oh yeah.
Wool.
Was
Wool.
tut sich da? Yes, it's wool, but what kind of wool? I better check with my wife right now. What is it? We bought a very expensive caticle. No? I mean, these are all correct. I'm just thinking of a particular coat that my wife and I once bought. We never even get to wear it. Okay, anyways.
It's a tweed coat, Rabbi. Tweed.
No. I'm looking for another expensive material that we paid.
Angora.
Pardon?
Angora.
No. What would it be? You know what? I can't even go on until I figure out which coat this is. Not cashmere. It's oh my goodness. Come on, guys, help me out here. Huh?
No, we don't know.
Mink, maybe now we're talking mink. Yeah, but so they have mink coats. A mink, yeah, it was some kind of a mink. I'm forgetting which mink it was. Anyways, you know what one mink said to the other
Caracule?
before being slaughtered? Don't worry, me wird sich treffen auf Simchas. If I could only remember, maybe it's mink. I'm forgetting.
Ermine.
Pardon?
Ermine.
No. Look, these are all correct. I'm just saying there's a particular coat that. Anyways, on that note, I'll make a commercial announcement. This morning, one of my friends called me. His father, who was a tall and broad man, he was about 6'1", 6'2", left a really beautiful, nice, long overcoat, goes beyond the knees, and he's looking to give it to somebody who would like, to a gentleman. So if there's a particular gentleman who would like such a coat, talk to me after the shir, and I will make sure that it goes to the right person to keep you warm over the winter. Now, how did I get distracted talking about coats? What's going on here? Oh, I'll tell you what I was thinking. I know what I was thinking. I remembered about a coat. There you go. It's cold now. Okay, winter's coming to us in Johannesburg. Now, if you have your coat, so we could say that the body is like the garment to the soul. Just as you hang up your coat when winter's over, right? By the time August comes around, you've either gotten immune to the cold or it's getting warmer and you put your coat away, right? Well, when now May comes around and it's getting cold, so you put your body lovingly into the earth from which it came while we go off to heaven. You put the coat away, you put the body away, right? In heaven, bodies aren't necessary. I know it's not exactly the right analogy, but if you're going to say the body is like the coat for the soul, then when we come back to earth, resurrection, reincarnation, however you want to call it, then we'll make use of the bodies again. Maybe that's another way of seeing it. If you have a better analogy, let me know. What's the point, my friends? Since it's lunch, it's time, almost time for lunch, so we have to just recap everything we discussed and try to really, truly crystallize the ideas. The body has no independent life. The soul does. That's the point. The body doesn't really experience life. It just tags along. Like the rabbi said on the video, we are not physical bodies having a spiritual journey. We are spiritual souls having a physical experience. So while the body is inhabited by the soul, yes, the body's alive. We're here. We see each other. We're infused with life. True. But what gives the body its life? The presence of the soul. So, and at some point, that ride ends for the body only, because the soul will continue to exist. Okay? And the soul, as we saw in that verse before, comes from God. God breathed into the nostrils of Adam a soul of life. The soul is called a chelek eleka mima'al mamash, an actual part of God. Just as God is eternal, the soul is also eternal. Every other creation was newly created by God. It never existed before. God created the sun, God created the stars, God created the heavens and earth, the land, the sea, all the creatures. All these things have never been. The human soul, in contrast, is described as chelek eleka. It's a piece of God within each one of us. It's a piece of the Eternal One that each of us possesses. And so it is the only thing in all of creation that was never actually created. Because if you come to think about it, it existed before we were physical bodies. Pardon? Yes. So it exists before we're born, and our soul will exist after we're born. Being born is the fusion of the body and soul coming together. Verstehst? So, I know these are mystical ideas, not necessarily agreed with by science and all, but if we try to define the neshama by its existence in the body, let's conclude with this thought. Actually, no, we still have 10 minutes, so I'll keep you going. Okay. One night, since we were talking about Chelm before, I'll tell you another Chelm story. Someone spied the moon reflected in a barrel of water. You know the story? Saw the moon reflected in a barrel of water. So the people of Chelm, imagining that the moon fell into this bottle, they sealed the bottle so that the moon would not escape. Yeah? And this way, they would never again have an issue with not being able to recite Kiddush Levana on a cloudy night. You know, in Chelm, it's Europe, and it gets cold and dark and cloudy and rainy and, you know, the winter weather. The next day, they opened the barrel to see the moon. And guess what? Lo and behold, there was no moon in there. They were very frustrated, and they decided that the moon was stolen. All right, my friends. We asked before, what was our question? The body-soul relationship. We asked about it. Think about the body and soul and what the distinction is between them. Can you think of an analogy to depict the body-soul relationship? Do you see it still in the same way? If we say the soul is the real me, not my body, why is my computer not charging? Weiß nicht. That's not good. All right, we'll figure that out. The shear is almost over, so if the computer dies now, I'm sorry, guys. We said that the body, the real me, is my soul, not my body. Yes? What else did we say? Let's keep this going. The real me, the soul, is eternal. So therefore, I am also eternal. And then we discussed how the real soul, our neshama, the real me, what's going on here now? We discussed how the real eternal me is unaffected by birth and death, which is the concept that we're concluding today's shiur with. I don't know why it's jumping around like that. I apologize. And with these 2 points in mind, we can understand why death isn't the end of life. It's just beginning of another phase of life. So this is something that we will, please God, discuss in greater detail next week. And we'll analyze a little bit further what life means, what's its significance, the real I, the neshama, which we discussed. Unlike animals, we discussed the difference. And I think we'll get into a much broader place, the difference, and going on further, there's a lot more to discuss. I would like to conclude. I'll show you a little video since we have 5 more minutes for today's shiur. Give me a moment. We'll conclude with one more little video.
Is unaffected.
A financial question, sure. Any questions are welcome.
My friend is a jet going to Israel next week, and he's got dollars and euros.
Yeah,
Can he convert both to shekels?
why not?
Yeah, Israel's international.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Okay.
On the street even.
Yeah, it's not a problem. I don't see why that would. It depends. Who wants rands, though? Does anybody want that? Okay, we're stopping the share, and I will put on one little video to conclude today. And here we go. Let's conclude with this little video. Okay.
Welcome to Vacuum 101.
I don't know what I'm sharing. See.
Come with me, little neshama. Let me hold you in my hands, and we'll fly away, you and I together, to a place down on the land. shy away, do as you're told. There's a little child waiting to be born today. You're to be his spark, his soul. But dear Malachut, no, I don't want to go. There's so much pain and evil upon the earth below. Let me stay here up in heaven, where it's safe and I'll be pure. Please don't make me go away. Can't you see I'm so afraid? Come with me, little Neshama. It's time you faced your destiny. As we fly beneath the clouds, now I will show you there is so much you can be. Yes, dear Malachut, I can see Kedusha over there. Someone's learning to live. There's another deep prayer. I will stay here if you answer me. It's all I need to know. You must promise me, dear friend, that I do be like that. Come with me, little Neshama love. Oh, it's a task that I must do. As I tap you on the lip, you will forget me. You're on your own, it's up to you. With me, little Neshama love, and let me hold you in my hand. And we'll fly away, you and I together, to a place above the land. I'm so afraid. Come with me, little Neshama. I've only come to take you home. There is no need to fear your destination. You've earned the place right by the throne. A place right by the
Beautiful.